Shared housing is permanent housing. It is permanent housing. It is a solution to end someone's homelessness.
I'm here with Todd Walker, who's the Executive Director of the Judeo-Christian Outreach Center in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And we're going to talk about shared housing today. Todd, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Hey, thank you, Rachel. Yes, I have been the executive director here for actually 14 years. I just celebrated my 14th anniversary a couple of weeks ago. Um, it has been an amazing journey and ride. I'm originally from Ohio, born and raised in Ohio. I earned an athletic scholarship to play football at Indiana University. Indiana University, the national champions. Had a great ride there. Briefly went to the Denver Broncos um, in the NFL. And after a brief stint there and the injuries, um, God kind of allowed me to make a pivot to serve people. And one of the messages he provided me was, now it's time for you to pour into people the way people have poured into you to get to where you are. I try to bring all those experiences to the table, but at the end of the day, I think it's just about loving on somebody, in spite of and whatever challenges they may present. Because as I tell our staff, our job is to plant seeds. So, it may not be fun planting that seed at the moment, but you just never know when you may reap a harvest at a later date or a later time. And we've gotten to see some of those flowers grow and some of those miracles happen with people getting in housing and being able to transform their lives.
And I've heard you speak a few times now, and one of the things that your work and the work of the Judeo-Christian Outreach Center is known for is innovation, which is really important right now because it is hard to house people in this market. And so you all have been doing some things with shared housing lately. In the context of homelessness, what does shared housing mean?
It's really having almost kind of liken it to when we were in college. We loved to have roommates in college. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't until we got older we wanted to be by ourselves. But it's having people live under the same roof, shared space. And then people do different models. Our model is unique to us that we've seen work best. But it's having people, living under the same roof. But the way we do it is, but being a part of different leases. So we actually put a lease on the room versus having everybody sign one lease. Because if everybody signs one lease and somebody doesn't make their rent payment, then everybody's impacted. And so we want to provide, so shared housing is just providing leases on a room and having those individuals access those rooms, but also have shared living space, shared bathroom space. And it's really a great way to add another tool to your tool belt when it comes to housing individuals who are experiencing homelessness, to give them an opportunity. A lot of people complain about shared housing, but we always tell our clients, you're in shared housing now. We run a 88 bed shelter now. So it's like, okay, if you're in the men's dorm, you got 30, 40 people in there, you're shared housing, but you'd be in a better experience going into a place that has 3 people living in there versus 88, or 40, depending on what dorm you're in. So it is very effective in terms of, just like you said, taking advantage of the current market. We just built 38 permanent supportive housing units, and that was a 12-year process from my first conversation about it to now that we're in the building, and we're still working to get in position to lease up. So that just tells you creating those units sometimes can take some time, and as people experiencing homelessness, their time is of the essence. It's very critical. People could lose their life just with the activities that happen on a day-to-day basis outside. And so it's very critical to be able to have some short-term opportunities, and shared housing is one of those because you're utilizing existing housing in the market. So we've seen it to be very effective.
And there's nothing weird about it. Like you said, a lot of us had roommates in college or when we were younger. And in this housing market, a lot of people are sharing housing with friends or family to help manage costs. I personally am. A lot of other people are too. What are some of the outcomes that you've seen from shared housing in your work?
I will tell you this, Rachel. We probably in our rapid rehousing programs, we're probably putting anywhere from 50 to 75, depending on how many grants we have at that time, per year in housing. And I would say 90% of those individuals are going into shared housing. So for us, it's critical to our success in helping people get into housing. We've been able to connect with a lot of landlords, and that's the big piece of it, is having that great relationship with your landlord inventory, because there could be moments where that individual may not make it in that specific house, and you may have to move them to a different location. And we've worked it to where our landlords are very open to allowing us to do that. But one of the reasons I think we're able to do it is because we educate them as thoroughly as we can on the situation. We know they're not going to be experts, nor do we want them to be. They have the property, so they've done their part. Our part is to educate them as much as we can and provide that support system for them. So when the client may be going through a challenge, especially even if we're not involved anymore, if we release that person and they're on their own now, we still want to be a resource to that landlord, because you never know if they access and obtain another property, we can be able to use them later. But I would say for us, it's critical. Without shared housing, we can't operate. And I must say this: all of our housing programs that we operate are for single individuals. And so you have a single individual, and as I know in our COC, we get the referral. We don't determine who actually gets the opportunity. So when the COC and coordinated entry makes that referral, a lot of times those individuals don't have income, or they're living on a fixed income. So how do you address that? You know what I mean? You can't just send everybody back until you get the perfect candidate to be able to go in that has just the right income. That's not reality. And so that's what kind of forced us to look at what are some opportunities where we can make it. I know people with no income, shared housing, as far as I know, is the only option, unless they were to get a call to go into a SRO, a single room occupancy. Otherwise, what other opportunities or options do you have for that individual? We don't have those type relationships with apartment complexes where they're going to let people move in with no income. They just don't want to take that risk. But shared has been, it's what we rely on, and for a variety of reasons, but that's just a few of them.
So we've been talking a lot about the benefits of doing shared housing. For organizations that want to get into it, what are some pitfalls that they should be aware of, and ways to avoid those pitfalls?
I would say the number one thing is not putting everybody on one lease, creating leases for each room. That could be potentially be a pitfall. And then also one thing I didn't mention is tying your utilities in with the rent. So our clients have one payment. It avoids all the challenges of somebody that has a gas bill or non-pay. They can begin working on paying those things off while they're in shared housing. So we keep the utilities in the landlord's name, and that's been beneficial. Early on when I took the job here, we would see people go into shared housing, but it would all be on handshake deals. There were no leases, so those individuals, and we weren't educated enough at that time to be able to tell that person don't do it. They're excited because they work on a construction site with it. I remember one in particular, he worked on a construction site with a gentleman, and gentleman invited him to move in where the landlord didn't have any knowledge of that. This guy's just making money off of his co-worker to live there. But as soon as they had an argument about who drank the orange juice, now he's back out on the streets and he's dealing with homelessness again. So it's important that I would say for a community or organization wanting to start it, to start small. We actually started off of, and kind of learned from our mistakes off of one house. We had a volunteer who just happened to see a pamphlet with some of our other programs and got interested in it once she read the description of the program. Her mother had just passed, and she had a 6-bedroom house in a very nice area here in Virginia Beach, and she was trying to decide what she wanted to do with the house. She was just in the process of going to just put it up for sale, and when she saw that, she said, "You know what? Maybe I can work with you guys and give you this house to be able to work with." And that's what we started with. People went in. We had them all on one lease initially. Um, we put the utilities in the client's name and left it up to the clients to kind of, who's going to be in charge and make the payments. But it was a catastrophe. So we learned early that we couldn't do that. And that's what kind of shaped our model. And also, each client having their own room. I think to make it as appealing as possible for us, that's a non-negotiable piece of it is when somebody goes into one of our shared housing units, they will have their own bedroom with a lock and key. So that way they have their own space. They can retreat if they need just to get away, to be able to think, to be able to have space to themselves. Outside of the living room and the kitchen stuff, but also allowing them to create the rules. Because if I create the rules, I'm basing it off what I like and what I don't like. I'm not living there. You guys need to have some input and empower yourselves of what you like, what you don't like. If you don't mind sharing the milk, then we won't put that in the rules. You know what I mean? But we let them kind of create the rules, and we've seen that work very effectively. And I'm gonna tell you this too. This is something that's really coming up over the last few years. Is some of the elderly individuals that we have going into units, they love it just because they can work together. They're sharing who's going to go to the grocery store, and I think that loneliness is a real thing.
Awesome. Anything else that you want to add about shared housing?
Um, it works. It works. And the last thing I'll say is, because a lot of people get mixed up on this, shared housing is permanent housing. It is permanent housing. It is a solution to end someone's homelessness.